I thought you was. How do you really was last year? It's like I'm there every day. So, I just had a question. She don't get the rest of it. Everything else went on. Just kind of a
We are going to go ahead and get started. This is the November 12th, 2019 Parks, Recreation, Human Services, and Public Safety Committee meeting. First order of business, doesn't look like there's any public comment, and so we're going to get right into committee business. And first order of business is approval of the October 8th, 2019 minutes. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve the minutes as written.
I'll second that.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Next, we have item B, monthly report on PAC operations. We have Autumn Grissett and Brian Hoffman.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor Honda, council members. I am going to pull up part of the presentation. Per Councilmember Kopeng's email earlier today, we have updated our report, which you'll see in front of you reflected. It reflects some gross revenue to report on today. So for October 2019, we had a total of 15 total usage days, which included the PAC Present series, We Will Rock You, the Performing Arts Foundation Gala featuring Los Lobos, Federal Way Symphony rehearsals, the Cheyenne Slaw Experience, Federal Way Symphony, Arts for Youth Matinee, and then Northwest Symphony Orchestra, as well as event rental spaces, which were the Greater Federal Way Chamber of Commerce, Jarvis Financial, Aerospace, and a City of Federal Way meeting. You can see year over year, 2018 to 2019, our total usage days is down. However, towards the bottom, you'll notice that our overall rental revenue as well as food and beverage revenue has adjusted in a positive manner. These are gross numbers, just as a note that net and overall financial picture will be discussed at FEDRAC. And then in addition, GM continued to attend local LTAC meetings as well as chamber luncheons and gala committee meetings to keep conversations moving with both our foundation members and local community members about the PAC. Is there any questions about October?
Committee, any questions? Deputy Mayor Honda.
Thank you. How is the naming rights coming along? Has there been any work on that?
Again, I know I sounded like a broken record, but we continue to move forward with those. We just recently hired somebody yesterday, Felipe Garcia is our AGM, to assist with some of those efforts and moving forward. So we're continuing to provide that. I know that it's a very slow process, but that's what we continue to work on.
In addition to that, just as note as well, Spectra has been working on other additional sponsorships that the PAC didn't have in the past. Some of those will be forthcoming over the next couple of months that you'll hear about at FEDRAC. So in addition to naming rights as a big one, but on a smaller level when it comes to sponsoring shows and other parts of the facility's operations.
Thank you. So the individual hired yesterday will just work on naming rights or will have other jobs?
Many other duties as assigned because we are a small staff, so.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Kopeng.
Yeah, Brian, I sense just a little defensiveness. I don't want to say this is one council member. I appreciate the fact that until the naming rights are given or are sold, the process has no definable measurement other than the effort that you guys are putting into it. So I think from my standpoint, just knowing that you have somebody else that's going to be putting in that effort, I think is helpful. But again, I think it's just like maybe having some sense of what kind of marketing plan you guys are putting together, who you're reaching out to. I think if you could give me just a little bit more information on the efforts that are being expended. Don't have to have names necessarily, because in some cases that's a sensitive issue. But I think just getting a little bit more meat on the bone, so we know that you're doing what you need to do. It's in the best interest of Spectra for that to happen. But that we have just a little bit more information so that we, as a council, can understand the process a little better.
Sure. Yep,
Okay.
and I can provide that to you probably in the next 48 hours with just kind of a rate cards, some of the things that we're looking at and those types of things, and have those, and provide that to you folks.
Okay, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Councilmember Moore? The only question I have, Brian, is just around, it looks like from last year to this year, the food and beverage revenue for the month of October went up, and then the rental just slightly down. So we can kind of prepare for next year, what are your plans as far as we get into some of those lighter months? How do we continue to generate revenue as far as rentals and kind of expand our capacity in that area?
So in regards to rentals, we put forth a budget that was very aggressive, that has been chipped away at by the finance department and the council for next year, where we had proposed $170,000 for a marketing campaign. And sometimes you have to spend money to make money. Where kind of the meat and potatoes is at and no pun intended with food and beverage, but that's where our money is. So we've got to spend a little bit of money to let folks know that we have, it's not just about what happens on stage, but some of these banquets and event space, that's where our money is for weddings, receptions, banquets, etc. However, we also have to, it's not, I'll be very frank, like the community center where we don't allow everybody to come in and those types of things. So there are fees associated with that where we have to, provide some of those things. Sorry about that. In order to get the banquet business and the event space business. So if you're asking particularly about the rental revenue in this particular case, we had less events, but we had better margins in food and beverage because that money was staying in-house rather than going outside to a third-party group that, would historically take that money from the PAEC or the city, so to speak. And these numbers are a little weird because we didn't take over food and beverage until October 15th of 2018. So versus a full month of this year because of the previous contract with Saver that the city had been in. So.
Okay. Thank you. Committee, any other questions? Deputy Mayor Honda?
Thank you. When we met with you, we talked about the resident art groups.
Mhm.
Have you had any more interest in anyone else applying to be a resident art group?
Not at this time, no.
It's also not something that's currently being advertised.
Okay.
As far as taking additional applicants. So that could be why we haven't received any at this time.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thanks a lot, Brian. Thanks, Otto.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so next we have the Public Safety Testing Third Amendment. We have Chief Wong.
Good evening, Chairman Johnson, Deputy Mayor, council members. For public safety testing, we need to amend our contract. We're asking for some additional money. My apologies. I didn't realize this was on the agenda. I was more prepared with my PowerPoint presentation and not this, so
No worries.
if you can give me a split second here. Yes, so for amendment number 3, we're asking to the increase the cost of our contract with public safety testing by another $2,560, and we'll use the existing money from our police department budget to do that. And we're just incurred a little bit more cost in our services with public safety testing.
Okay, committee, any questions? Councilmember Copeland?
Really a comment. Serving on the Civil Service Commission, I saw the dramatic increase in better qualified individuals to applicants for the city police department to choose from as a result of our affiliation with this organization. So I think it's very important that we continue. It's a very small investment, and I think it's well worth the additional funds. It's a good program.
Yeah, it's worked out good for us because they're able to, they have capability of reaching out to a lot more potential applicants, and they can constantly feed us with the written exam and the physical agility test. Had our HR department conduct all this work, I think it would just be overwhelming with the agency of our size and number of hires that we have.
Yep. It could be a full-time job for one individual. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Seems pretty straightforward. Any other questions, committee? Do I have a motion?
I move to forward the contract amendment number 3 of the existing subscriber agreement with public safety testing for the recruitment and testing of police candidates to the November 19th, 2019 council consent agenda for approval.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thanks a lot. We have you again, Chief, for the theft and burglary report.
Okay, so I was asked to provide some numbers on number of burglaries and thefts and percentage of arrest. So I'll share that with you, and then our number of arrests we've made in regards to aggressive panhandling or pedestrian interference. I'll share that information with you. So in terms of our burglary, I'll start with that crime here first. So for 2019 through September 30th, 1919, this year, we've had 425 burglaries and 27 arrests from those crimes. So our solve rate, clear rate for burglary is 6%. If you look at 2018, we had total of 684 burglaries. Now, these crimes are both commercial and residential. And again, last year we had 36 arrests, 5% solve rate. In 2017, 687, 37 arrests, 5% arrests. So looking at 3-year average, we're looking at 5 to 6% arrest rate when we look at burglaries, both residential and commercial. If you have questions, I can pause, or I can just continue on next category of theft.
Please continue. Thank you.
Okay. So when you look at total larceny and theft, year-to-date through September 30th, I shouldn't say year-to-date, just through third quarter, we had 2,436 crimes. When you look at purse snatching, 58 for the year. Last year, 61. 2017, we had 80. Shoplifting, 568 through September 30th. Shoplifting is where you're going to have the highest number of arrests, 331, 58%. Then you look at 2018, we had a total of 652 shoplifting incidents with 374 arrests, 57%. When you look at 2017, 62% arrest rate. Theft from building, 106, 1 arrest, and you can look at the other years, 164, 220. Theft from motor vehicle, 994 through September 30th, 1,363 the year before, 1,478, 1% solve rate. Theft of motor vehicle parts, 131 this year through September 30th, 187, 199. So all other larceny is listed there as well. So when you look at all 3 years, this year, our solve rate for theft is 15%, in 2018, 14%, and then in 2017, 18%. So really, this is the bulk of my presentation for this evening. The other panhandling is going to be pretty brief, but I'd be willing to answer any questions you might have regarding our burglary and our theft. And I would tell you that our overall crime after October, we're probably going to be at 9 to 10% less overall crime than the previous year. I would tell you that we've had an uptick with robberies of convenience store and some subways. Obviously, that's very concerning. I want you to know that our officers, our detectives have been working very hard to try to solve these crimes, and we are making some progress. So this is one of those things where here's a particular crime that we're seeing an uptick, and then we're going to try to solve it. When we solve that, it will calm down, and then, whatever issues that come up, we'll allocate resource to solve. But overall, what I'm telling you is that when you look this year to date, we've had 1 murder in our city, which is pretty low compared to what we've experienced in the past. So we're doing good in that area. That's an area that we're doing really well. But robbery in the last month or so, clearly it's up. We have some individuals committing robberies, and we're working hard to solve that. So hopefully we'll get to a positive resolution and bring those numbers down.
Thank you, Chief. Committee, any questions?
Yeah.
Councilor Coker.
In your experience, Chief, when we see a spike in activity like this, we attribute to one or a few individuals, or you think it's something that everybody's decided they're going to do?
No, I mean, human behavior is really tough to predict. So this is one of those things that, yes, we are experiencing an uptick in robberies. I just want the policy group and the community to know that we are working very hard. We're working diligently, try to solve these crimes. There isn't too many people going around with guns robbing convenience stores or subways. So once we make some arrests or solve that, it's going to, bring those numbers down. In fact, there's very small number of people that will commit gun crimes. So when those things occur, we will try to make an arrest, because when you do that, it's going to significantly, impact gun-related crimes. So I just want to share with you, and I think everyone knows, we are certainly seeing an uptick in robberies, and we are working hard to address that.
It's, I think, top of mind for a lot of people. So appreciate that, but I also know that there's things that you don't want to talk about related to your efforts, your current efforts. So we understand that. I think or I understand anyway, that you want to make sure that they don't know we're coming, right?
Sure.
Other than we're looking for them.
Right.
Yeah.
We don't want to reveal any information.
Right.
What I can tell you is we are making progress, but, we're just not prepared to share the
Sure.
details at this time.
Thank you. And to be clear, these numbers for 2019 are only through October, and they're being compared against numbers from the full year in 2018 and 2017. Is that correct?
Not quite correct. You'll see the asterisk for 2019 right here,
Yeah.
and then down here. So it's really through September 30th.
Got it. Okay,
three-
all the way up to October.
9
okay.
months.
But basically, we've got, 9 months. Well, no, would be, well, no,
We've got
it's
3
fine.
months
Yeah,
left.
Yeah,
Yeah,
9 months,
we're
we've got 3
through-
months left.
Yep.
Okay, so 25% of our numbers for 2019 are not showing up yet, and we'd love them to stay where they are, but they're not going to. So
That's correct. And
is there any way that we could do equivalent numbers so we can see trends or understand trends? Because, I mean, the 2019 number with an asterisk is good. It's good to know where things are, but comparing that with a full year doesn't really doesn't indicate any trend.
Well, I think you can do something, because typically what we do is if we're doing projecting, we would just simply add, we're entering the holiday season, so we tend to have,
Yeah.
but you could add another, 25%.
I would say even offering a asterisk with projected numbers based on these, I think doing it that way, I think would be helpful to me as a council member, as opposed to looking at a number that, I've done the math from the dais in the past to figure things out as we're going, and I think that looking at these numbers, the trends are favorable. I think as far as, and what you said, I think looking at crime being down 9%, but that could be helpful.
Okay.
The challenge is if there's a spike in something and you project it, all of a sudden it looks like, oh my gosh, the world is coming to an end. When in fact, that numbers, they level out. So again, if we go back to predicting human behavior, it's not something we can do. But I think especially this late in the year, some trends are somewhat established. So anyway.
I think our crime analyst is sometimes really careful about trying to project, because then it's almost like when the numbers are off, I think they're just careful, but I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if there's a way to do it where she feels comfortable, we can get a little better picture of where things are trending, that'd be helpful.
Okay.
Yeah.
One thing I will point out, at least the percentage cleared is staying consistent.
Which is fantastic,
That's-
yeah. And
that's-
obviously, we want to see that number at 100%, but,
Right.
but anyway. Thank you.
Chief, can you describe kind of the process when like a convenience store or a business gets robbed like multiple times, so it's one of those places that's kind of repeat, how do you work with one of those places to help them have a secure business, I guess, when it's constantly happening at the same place?
Sure. So what we've done recently is when we try to mitigate and try to increase our chances of, apprehension. So one of the things might be, it's not uncommon for, robbers to, come through the business, maybe even day before or just prior to the robbery, to see who's in the store and that type of thing. So, one of the things we encourage them, if you see suspicious vehicle, persons, don't hesitate calling us. That's step one. Make sure there's clear visibility into the store so that, somebody driving by, walking by can see into the store. Maybe, at certain peak times, having more than one employee working at the time, because robbers are less likely to come in if there are other people or witnesses, inside the business. We try to enhance, video surveillance capabilities at that particular business. So there's a lot of things that we do. We deploy, recently we've reached out to just about every convenience store business in our Federal Way community and, just talk about when to report things. Some of the things we're sharing with you, and our area car officers will make contact with them so they get to know kind of the clerks on a first name basis. Lots of frequent business checks. So there's other tactics and deployments that we'll do, but we try to work in partnership with the business, because clearly we can't be at each, place of business or a convenience store all the time. So we have to rely on people to call in, suspicious activity and so forth. And we'll use, other technologies once we have a robbery to potentially, detect and, apprehend the criminals. So there's a lot of things that we do, but sometimes, on the individuals who are committing these crimes, they're, very street savvy. They're gathering their intel too. They may commit a robbery soon after the officer leaves. I mean, they're watching the business themselves, and sometimes they have accomplices working with them. So, yes, it can be a challenge at times. But, yeah, I just want to convey that we're doing everything we possibly can to try to make apprehension and stop the uptick in the robberies that we've had.
Mm-hmm. And I understand it's a partnership between our department and the business itself as well. It's just something that I've been thinking about in light of, a couple places within our city that seem to have been, hotspot areas for this type of crime.
Mm-hmm.
So appreciate describing the process, though.
Yep, we're hopeful that our investigators will identify and hold the individuals accountable, and hopefully it'll calm things down. But yes, we definitely have some individuals committing robberies in our community and in a particular area, and we'd like to get to the bottom of it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Deputy Mayor Honda.
Thank you. Percent cleared, what does that mean?
Arrested.
So 1% of shoplifter, let's see, 58%.
Yep, 57 to 62%.
So they were arrested, were they charged?
Every case in which we make an arrest, yes, it's referred to the prosecutor's office.
But does that mean that they were, does that mean that it was followed through with a charge and that they went to court and?
We're not tracking each one, but I could
Okay.
assure you that most of them are, yes, they're filed by the prosecutor's office, yes.
Were most of those misdemeanor shoplifting arrests, or were they? more significant?
I think it's blending of both misdemeanor and felony.
Okay. If we had more police officers out on the streets, do you think that the amount of larceny and theft would be reduced?
The simple answer is if we have more officers on the street, more boots on the ground, sure, it would have a positive impact in reducing crime. Quantify and measure how much it would reduce in terms of theft, it would be hard to measure, but I could tell you that if we had more officers and more detectives, we would work more cases and solve more cases, so it would have more of a positive impact in reducing crime.
So we would still have let's say, shoplifting from Fred Meyer occurring. You would just have, if the store were to call and say that someone was shoplifting, we would have an officer there more quicker?
Of course. I mean, I would say this, if Fred Meyer's or any retail business, detains a shoplifter and calls the police, we're going to respond and we're going to make an arrest. Sometimes it's cite and release at the scene. It all depends, but bottom line is, if we have more officers on the street, would it reduce our response time? Sure it would, of course, yes.
With shoplifting, what responsibilities do we expect from the stores to stop shoplifting? Do we have any expectations that stores will have certain things in place? This seems to be something that our community is really concerned about. So I'm trying to understand more what we do with the shoplifter. Mm-hmm. So do we expect that, let's say Macy's has something in place that would prevent shoplifting? I know they have the tags, but I also know that not all the tags actually are sent. The sensor doesn't always go off on all of them. So what do we expect from the retail community in helping us solve the shoplifting crisis that we seem to be hearing about?
I would tell you, I don't know how much influence the city or the police department can have on their company policies when it comes to, theft and shoplifting. So, for example, some, retailers, they have corporate policies that they will not go hands-on. So if they, loss prevention encounters a shoplifter and say, "Sir, ma'am, I'd like you to, stop. I'm loss prevention. We'd like you to come back into the store. We'd like to talk to you." If they run, they do not go hands-on. That's a corporate policy. And they're making a, business decision as to whether they're going to authorize their loss prevention to go hands-on, detain someone, handcuff them using force, and then calling the police. So some retailers do go hands-on and will detain shoplifters. So it's based on their experience. We've had incidences where retailers do that and then they have an in-custody death or they have a lawsuit for excessive force. So for us to tell them what they will do or not do, that's not, we can recommend, or here's how to deter theft and here's what you do. Walmart, for example, has greeters. When you come in, you're on video surveillance, they greet you, they look at you. It's all designed to deter theft and provide, customer service with, greeting with customers coming in. So I would tell you that we don't dictate how they'll do it, but I'll tell you what, if they call us for help because they have a shoplifter detained or they have a theft in progress or they think they do and they call us, we will respond and try to intervene to prevent the theft, or sometimes we'll wait till they come outside and then we make the arrest. So it all depends. So I would tell you a lot of the retailers do not go hands-on, and sometimes they're not interested in seeking prosecution. They just want the individual, trespass from the premise. So that happens where retailers don't follow up and provide us with the information so that we can sometimes cite the individual for theft. I hope that helps you, but we can't tell corporate America how to deal with shoplifters because it's a policy decision on their part.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, committee?
I have a comment. I just have a comment, Chief. Obviously, with the burglaries going on, that is the topic of the current time. And just wanted to thank you for your efforts and the due diligence of our officers and in combating that and trying to address that. So just wanted to say thank you to that. Also, thank you for working with our convenience stores on that partnership and techniques and advice. I think that's really, really valuable. I hope they found value in that. I don't know what their responses were or how they felt about the PD reaching out. I assumed they were pleased about it. But just wanted to just say thank you. Certainly recognize the work you're doing, and I understand that there's upticks, as you like to say, and looking forward to getting this thing resolved and notifying the public in the best possible way to provide closure to this. So,
Yeah, we have a great working relationship, especially, our officers working with the clerks and, our management, having interaction with the ownership. I would tell you the relationship is good. And when we have robberies and things like that, those are the kind of things that keep me up at night. But I know that our men and women are working really hard, to serve our citizens and to try to, make arrests when these things occur. So, thank you.
and just to the committee, I do believe that I appreciated the question of these. Certainly, they're arrested, but how many are prosecuted, and what does that look like? And of that, how many of these are repeat offenders? And maybe they're not, maybe there isn't, but I think that's. I think those are some questions that I think we need to discuss and continue to have a conversation on, because I think that was part of the concern that I was kind of having when we had the homeless task force special council meeting, was just having those type of questions, I guess. So anyways, thank you.
Councilmember Cobain?
No, I just wanted to just emphasize, shoplifting is something that we've had a very good record of clearing, of getting the arrest. And I think that speaks to the partnership that the police department has created with the retailers. So thank you for that. I know that, well, let me just say, what specific efforts has the police department expended to make that partnership stronger and provide, especially the smaller retailers, with the support that they need, or that would be helpful to them in reducing shoplifting crime?
I think one of the success stories that we have, and I think we deter a lot of theft, particularly at the Commons. So one of the partnership that we have is with the Commons properties, that we have 3 officers that are assigned to the mall itself and all the businesses surrounding that area. So if they observe potential theft or suspicious activity, they have 3 officers assigned. So I think having officers there, partnership, and they pay for roughly half the cost of salary and benefit for these officers to be at the mall. So we think it's a win-win partnership. So that's number one. 2, some of the, like the Walmarts, the Target, Home Depot, some of these larger businesses, we have partnership with them. And to create efficiency, we actually have them file some of their reports online. So they have online capability of reporting all shoplifting crimes, regardless of the outcome. And then sometimes those cases are sent to us, it's reviewed by the officer, and charges are filed that way as well. So we have capability of being more efficient as far as filing charges on shoplifting cases as well. But I would just tell you that we have our crime analyst prevention specialist positions that are working with the businesses and so forth. It's all part of to build trust with our business community and so forth. So I think this work is continual, and I know when I interact with businesses at communities and so forth, tend to receive quite a bit of positive feedback. Maybe they're just telling me the positive things because I'm the police chief. But, I know we're working hard constantly to build trust and build that partnership, working with our business community.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Any other questions, committee? Thanks, Chief. Appreciate your presentation there.
Sir, I have one more slide.
Oh, you do?
So I
Okay,
don't-
great.
If you were ready to move on,
Oh, okay.
I wanted to do that because I thought we would spend most of our time. Far as what we've done with panhandling, aggressive begging or pedestrian interference, there isn't a lot of enforcement that's really been going on because with the U.S. Supreme Court ruling that panhandling or asking somebody for money is protected activity, the freedom of speech, I think most municipalities, in terms of, I know sometimes this can be a passionate issue about people, begging for money on the side, and they want the government, the city, the police to do something. What I'm telling you is that the courts have ruled over and over, that is a protected activity. From a law enforcement perspective, we're here to protect people's constitutional rights. When the U.S. Supreme Court says begging or asking somebody for money is a legal, lawful activity, we're not going to be able to arrest people for that. Now, if people cross the line and they do aggressive begging, you're told no, but they keep following you and consistently bother you for money and so forth. Now it's going to go into aggressive begging. Or pedestrian interference. If they're standing literally in the roadway interfering with traffic while they're panhandling, creating a safety issue, then we can interject and get involved. But what I would tell you is that even if people are begging in a place where they shouldn't be begging, just simply asking them to move on. Even people that are 99.9% of the time will comply with the officer's request. So there are very little instances where it really requires physical arrest or citing someone for, under the city ordinance. But the courts have pretty much ruled that, begging in different ways is lawful. So I know that's one of the frustrations of many of our citizens, but from a law enforcement point, we're not going to be able to, arrest people for begging on the side of the road.
Councilmember Moore?
Chief, I just want to have you just repeat something. So when someone's begging on a street corner and a car gives them money, but and let's say they're at an intersection, the lights turn green, but the person gives money, causing for the other person behind them to wait, is that aggressive? Or what would that definition be?
Not to the beggar, but if somebody stops in the roadway and now they're impeding traffic, an officer could take enforcement on the motorist and issue a motorist a ticket for, interfering with traffic flow or blocking the roadway. But in terms of what the courts have ruled is if somebody's wanting to give money and they're sticking money out the window, somebody just steps out into the roadway and grabs the money and gets back onto the sidewalk, the courts have said that's protected activity. But if you're literally, now blocking traffic and won't move and cars can't go, now you're interfering with traffic. That's something you can be arrested for if they don't comply and get out of the road.
Chief, do you attribute the lack of citations for this because citizens just don't call the police department? And then my second question is the type of citation. So if they are given a citation for aggressive panhandling, what is that? Like, can you describe what the citation is? Like, what is it for?
I haven't researched the data on the number of calls on panhandling, but I think over time, I think people are learning that it is, protected activity, and we really can't arrest people for asking people for money. So I think the calls itself has gone down, but I think when we do get calls, it's usually like maybe more of a welfare check. Sometimes there's a child involved, or there's somebody who's taking a nap on the side of the road and they just want us to check and make sure that the person's okay, or something like that. So we get more calls like that, but I don't know that, I think in terms of, hey, there's somebody begging on the side of the road and, I think that's illegal activity. I don't think we see that so much anymore. I would tell you in terms of aggressive begging or pedestrian interference, we can make a physical arrest. So, but obviously you'll see that the numbers are pretty low. But you can also issue a ticket and with a person promising to appear in court. So there are a couple of options. But so far this year, we haven't arrested anybody on our city ordinance on aggressive begging or pedestrian interference. And you'll see it's the same, or federally revised code, it's the same ordinance, but we haven't made any arrest on that. And like I said, if we get a complaint, we think they're literally on the median of the roadway. Sometimes we'll see that like on 320th at Rite Aid or across the street. we'll simply, if we get a call on that, because it looks dangerous, and it is dangerous, so a little inattention, someone's going to get run over. If we get called on that, yes, we will go there and ask the person to, go to the side of the road, either side, so it's safe. And not be in the middle.
And this also doesn't include, panhandling right outside of restaurants or stores. So like, if they're literally right in front of the front door of a restaurant, is that considered aggressive panhandling?
Nope, not if you just ask. If you say, hey, I'm out of gas, would you give me some gas money at a gas station? That wouldn't be a violation of the law. But if the business owner says, this is private property and I really don't want this person here, begging for money, we will go there and ask them to, hey, the business has called us. We'd like you to, leave this premise. And like I said, no one's ever said no, that I can recall, that I'm aware of. If it gets to a point where somebody says, I'm not leaving, and this is private property, let's say Fred Meyer parking lot. The employees call, management calls the police. We don't like this person asking our customers for money. Of course, we will go there and help the business. They can't be there. It's on private property. But if they're on a public roadway, side of the road, public right-of-way, then they have every right to beg for money.
Okay. Councilmember Copain.
Is there any exception, I think, if I remember right, having somebody come close with an ATM, that can be considered aggressive immediately, isn't that the case?
That's correct. That's our
Okay.
current ordinance. You can't ask for, beg for money near an ATM machine.
Okay, so that would be the exception, because there's basically, that person is vulnerable in that they're actually trying to get cash out of the machine, and someone by force could basically intercept that cash. And
Sure, that
So,
could be
yeah.
obviously a concern, yeah. when
yes,
you're
okay.
taking
all right.
money out of a
So
machine.
that would be the exception.
Yep,
And
that is an exception.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Honda.
Thank you. When we passed this, this ordinance, we were trying to be as tough as we could here in Federal Way. And I'd like to know the legal definition of aggressiveness, because to many different people, aggressiveness is something different. To someone who's 80 years old and someone continues to bother them, that's aggressive. Certainly, I've heard several people tell me that what they feel is aggressive panhandling, which I might not feel would be aggressive towards myself. So what do we use as our legal definition of aggressiveness when it comes to this issue?
That's a perfect segue for Eric. And maybe, Chief, you could still be there as well if you have anything to add. But we were going to talk about the ordinance review, and I think you were pointing to him anyways. But
Sure, I would tell you that just, if you have a scenario where you're going to a business, somebody comes up to you and say, hey, do you have, a dollar or two you could, donate or give, and you say, no, I don't, and you keep walking. If that person follows you and says, I'm asking you again, I'd like to get then I would say that's aggressive. If you're asked once and you say no, and the person, and you go your way and their way, I wouldn't say that's a crime. And I would tell you this too, I totally understand from a citizen perspective that, and every citizen's different, it's just having somebody come up to you and ask you for money itself can be very uncomfortable, but I think the courts have ruled that just asking for money in itself is not a crime. But if you say no and they keep following you and they keep asking you again and again, I would say that's aggressive begging.
So I've had people tell me that panhandlers have come up to their cars and pounded on their windows. Is that aggressive?
I would say depending on how they do it. If they come up and maybe like just tap on your window in a non-aggressive manner and you have interaction with them one time, I don't know that's going to be aggressive begging.
Okay.
Yeah, it all depends, if the persons that they came up, the way they were behaving, the tone of voice, they were frightened, possibly, it's possible.
Okay,
So
thank you.
As far as legal definition, maybe I'll have the Assistant City Attorney maybe read you that or share that with you.
yeah, Eric, if you could come up and, so item F is Panhandling Safety Ordinance Review. So we have Eric Rhodes, our Assistant City Attorney.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor, Chairman, committee members. I'm here to talk about the city's pedestrian interference ordinance and give you a review of that. I'll start with the definition of aggressive begging to address the deputy mayor's question. According to the city's code, as it reads now, aggressive begging is begging combined with intimidation. And intimidation is conduct that will that includes persisting to beg after being refused, following or approaching a person who has already refused, using violent or threatening gestures, using profane or abusive language, touching or causing physical contact with another person without consent. And that's it. So I will also give you a little more information about that ordinance and the history of it. The pedestrian interference section of our code has been in the city code since the city first enacted a criminal code. The code as it reads now, it regulates 3 types of behavior: obstructing traffic, intimidation, and begging when it's combined with intimidation. It begins with some definitions, and then it reads, a person is guilty of pedestrian interference if in a public place he or she intentionally aggressively begs or obstructs pedestrian or vehicular traffic. So since that code section was first enacted, it's been revised multiple times. The first few revisions were adding additional regulations that further restricted the conduct. And but then it was revised in 2011, and that was shortly following a court case that found that sections of the code were unconstitutionally vague. So in 2011, the city revised the code to eliminate some of the regulations that were contrary to the court ruling. In 2015, it was again revised to eliminate some provisions which had similar provisions had been found unconstitutional, had been found to be violations of freedom of speech in another jurisdiction. So the code was revised again in 2015. We are planning to soon revise the code again because in 2016, shortly after the latest revisions here in Federal Way, the Washington Supreme Court held that a very similar ordinance in Lakewood violated the First Amendment. So in that Lakewood case, the court stated some longstanding court law that the First Amendment protects charitable appeals for money, including begging, as the chief just explained. It also confirms that streets, sidewalks, and roadways are public forums where the freedom of speech receives the most protection. And so regulations asking for money, regulating that behavior of asking people for money is likely going to be found unconstitutional no matter how we do that. So our plan is, and my recommendation to you will be, once I've gotten into the details of this revision, will be to revise the code to eliminate any references to begging, and instead we'll continue to focus on the behavior of intimidation and obstruction of traffic. Those will continue to be regulated and prohibited within the city of Federal Way.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Committee, any questions? Deputy Mayor Honda.
Thank you. I appreciate that we're talking about this, and I appreciate the chair allowing this to be on the agenda. So there are other cities where people just simply don't panhandle. It's from what I've been told from our citizens. And when I go around, I do see less panhandling in other cities than I do here. And there are some days that I don't see anyone panhandling here when I drive around. And I think it depends on the weather. Most of it, I think, depends on the weather. If it's freezing cold or just unbearable to be outside, you're not likely to see someone panhandling. Are there cities that have stronger bans or stronger language in the ordinances that has been upheld by the court for panhandling?
I don't know of any jurisdiction that has stronger language that has been upheld by the court.
I know when we passed this in 2015, we were told that it was as tough as we could get it, and that it could likely be, we could go to court. Someone would fight us in court. So we've had at least 3 citations in 2018 on this. Has anyone taken us to court that we haven't been told about? Has anyone fought us on this to say that it's unconstitutional?
I don't think there's been any case filed related to those 2018 arrests.
Were those the only citations that have been given for panhandling since 2015, since we instituted the newest revision?
I don't know that answer, but I can look into that. I think those were the only ones in 2018.
Yeah, Deputy Mayor, when you went back a couple of years, I think the numbers are going to be small regardless. I would tell you this, to answer maybe part of your question, people are going to go panhandle where they have success. And what I could tell you about Federal Way is that we have some of the major, corridor, Highway 99, high volume traffic locations. We have some of the largest businesses like Costco. They're going to go where there's a lot of people, high volume. So if you go to rural areas where there's very low traffic flow or volume, you're going to see very little number of people begging because the return for standing there asking for money is going to be pretty low. So I would tell you that Federal Way is a community that, it's one of the larger cities, and we have a high volume of vehicular traffic. So you're going to probably percentage-wise just have more people. But you can go anywhere down Highway 99, any arteria, you're going to see panhandling going on. This is not just limited to Federal Way. You can go to Bellevue, you can go to anywhere. You're going to have beggars. Now, percentage-wise, is there more in some community than not? Sure, I think that can happen, but if you're really looking for people panhandling, it can go just about any community, and you're going to see people panhandling. I think what happens here is people who live here, they're a lot more accustomed to focusing on Federal Way, your hometown. But you can go to any social community group, and you're going to see a lot of similar things to people where they live. If you live in Kent, you're going to see problems in Kent. If you live in Auburn, you got problems in Auburn. Or, Bonnie Lake, and people go, why can't we do things like in Federal Way? They do this. Well, people don't know. You don't see the problem when you don't live in that community. So I would just tell you that with Arterial Street and our robust transit system, you're going to have more people coming in, begging at times, and if they don't have success, sometimes they go somewhere else. But I hope that answers your question, why I think people think there might be more here.
So what about when children are with an adult and the adult is panhandling? Have the courts addressed that at all?
I don't think the court's going to look at that. We work with Child Protective Services. There are times where we think that it's not in the best interest of the child or there's some safety issue. We have referred cases to, Child Protective Services and on that. But I think they're very reluctant to act on that too. As long as the child looks healthy, they're being nourished, and they have proper clothing. I don't think that's something we're going to be able to rest on. And I don't think CPS is going to take action unless they believe that the child's physical health is in danger because of the activity, whatever that may be.
Okay. I would think that the child could potentially be in danger by being near a busy road. I've had 3 children and a few grandchildren now, and you can never tell, especially the younger they go, when they're going to dart out into traffic or do something that is going to endanger them. So I would, my personal opinion is if you've got a child, especially a young child, standing with an adult who's panhandling on a busy street, you have put that child in danger. And I can't imagine that the courts wouldn't see that also.
Yeah, if there's a child in a stroller or if there's a child there, it's officer discretion. If there is imminent danger to that child or what have, we can take a child into protective custody. But it puts the police in a very difficult situation of now we're going to take this child from their mom or dad, right, turn them over to Child Protective Services. I'm not saying it's never happened. If there's clear danger, I think we can do that, but I think we're careful with that as well. But if we call Child Protective Service and say, we got somebody panhandling at Costco with a child, they're certainly not going to respond and take that child into protective custody with us.
Okay, thank you.
Chief or Eric, one question I had is around use of property around the city. So I've seen a couple times around the city where somebody that's panhandling will have like a sign that's utilized by city folks, like Center Stage sign, for example, or someone else, and they'll use that as like their sign to panhandle. Is that considered any type of could that be a citation, for example, or is that just allowable to utilize like signs that are a performing arts center sign or a Center Stage or a campaign sign? I've seen that a lot of times throughout the city, and can you respond to that at all?
Are you saying that someone has stolen a sign that someone else's
Correct.
sign and repurposed it?
Correct.
So, taking someone else's sign is in violation of other laws. It's not addressed by the pedestrian interference or begging laws.
Certainly, taking somebody's sign and convert it to a sign would not be appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something that, I don't know that we would just, on the visual side of that, immediately take enforcement action, but it's something that we could do, in terms
Yeah.
of contacting the business. We got to have a victim and so forth, but that would not be I haven't seen that so much. So this is something we could intervene and say, hey, that's not acceptable. You can't be stealing somebody's sign and then converting it, but.
I've seen it, especially on 320th, and I've seen, folks just drive by it, including police, where it's like a campaign sign, and on the other side it says, would you please give me money or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I was just wondering if that was even a citation at all.
Just playing off that, I wonder if that's something we can amend our ordinance to kind of add, theft of sign, is cause for citation. Is that something that we can modify that policy? I don't know. I'm just brainstorming with the committee, but yeah, I think it's a fair point, Councilmember Johnson. So I think another question I kind of have, and it's kind of interesting because it's coming across like, it seems like we can't do anything, which is what I'm kind of getting out of this. But there is opportunity for us to be creative, and I'm confident that the Land Use and Transportation Committee will be discussing that next month. So I think, while it's frustrating to say legally there's nothing we can do, I think there are other opportunities that may arise for creativity, and I look forward to, again, discussing that on next month's Land Use and Transportation. I've been working with Chair Kopeng to have it on the agenda. But the question I have is and I really don't like this what-if questions, but here's one. What if a business has a signage on their own property saying no loitering, no of that nature, and right underneath that, there's a person that's begging? Are they considered, they probably would be considered off the property? Or, how does that work into this whole thing?
If a business doesn't want somebody on their
Like
property.
there's a sign that says no loitering or something of that nature, and yet someone's right there,
Or no panhandling.
or no, right.
We still would contact the business owner. We would need someone to say, yes, physically telling us they don't want somebody on their property, and then we would go make contact, persuade the person to leave. If it really came to they refuse to leave and it's on private property, we can make an arrest for criminal trespass. But we would contact somebody there. Just even though if there was a sign there, we wouldn't go there and just automatically make an arrest, because the employer there might say, or the business owner might say, hey, I didn't give the police permission to trespass or arrest anyone. It would just be protecting our own city from an unlawful arrest, because there's always that chance that until we have a complainant in business telling us, sure. If officers are being proactive, like our special operations unit, they're, being proactive, they could see somebody panhandling, or let's say somebody's on the premise, they could certainly go in and make contact and say, yes, I do want them, trespass from my property. We'll do that. That's a standard practice that we will do. You have property rights as a business owner. We would assist them with that.
So it sounds like we need to communicate with businesses and help them, educate them that if this is an activity you want, then so be it. If not, then you got to be in touch with the police department. Is that what I'm kind of sensing?
Yep, sometimes we get citizen complaints. We get 911 calls about somebody panhandling on the side of a business. We contact property management, we contact ownership, and they're like, hey, we're hands off. We don't care. So, okay, I mean, if it's their property and they want somebody on their property, they don't mind somebody panhandling, then it's their, but most business owners don't want that. But we've had some business people say, hey, it's okay with us. We don't want any enforcement. Okay.
Councilmember Copeland.
I just want to say, I hesitate to get too far into the weeds on creating or redefining or defining down illegal activity to, absconding with a sign for the use of panhandling. I think the most direct remedy to this situation really isn't through law enforcement. It's through citizens understanding that panhandlers are there because they're getting money from the citizens. And if the citizens don't give them money, then they're not going to panhandle here anymore. I think that's a very direct relationship. The challenge is that we have a very compassionate community. We have a community that cares about the people around. I've seen it over and over again. So what we really need to do, I think, is really create an understanding around the alternatives that there are to panhandling and how we can get help to people that are in that situation, legitimately looking for sustaining funding through begging. I also know that there are people, and this has been documented, that do this because they can make $100 or $200 or $300 in an afternoon, and that's their income source. So and that's, again, this is about the community and what the community wants to do, and I think that there can be some alternatives that we look at to help get the word out on the other avenues to exercise that level of compassion that I think so many in our community feel, without contributing to a problem that we're not going to solve through law enforcement necessarily, based on the way the laws are constructed at this point. So, thank you.
Great. Any other questions, committee, or comments? Anything, Chief Eric, to add on to that?
No.
Okay. All right, well, with that, that is all that we have on the agenda. We're pretty short agenda tonight, so unless there's anything else for the good of the order, we will adjourn, and our next regular meeting is December 10th, 2019.